President of Paradise Valley Community College. Thank you so much for joining us for the first of many forums to showcase the candidates for our Maricopa County Community College District Governing Board. Allow me just to say a few words, and then it'll be my pleasure in a moment to introduce our moderator for tonight's event. You are sitting in the Cranit Student Center, a newly renovated, remodeled center we opened about a year ago as a result of voter support, unanimous support across all of our precincts to support the growth and the development of the community colleges. That's just one example of the kind of policy support that our district governing board provides us at the campus level where teaching and learning truly occurs. So again, welcome to Paradise Valley Community College. One of our visions and missions of our college, which aligns with the district, is that of civic engagement. And there's no better example of an event like this in terms of representing what it means to convene the community, to listen to issues related around an election for our district governing board. So we're so pleased to host this event tonight. I want to acknowledge that there are some students in the crowd tonight, and I also want to acknowledge that they are students, so they may get up and leave because I know a number of our students have classes tonight. So candidates, they're not being rude, they're actually going to class. So I just wanted to make sure people were aware of that, but I'm so pleased that our students are here. Right, I saw. I'd also like to take a personal privilege to introduce two of my colleagues with the Chancellor's Executive Council. Just joining us is Dr. Marie Harper-Marinick, sitting in the back there, who is our Executive Vice Provost, or Executive Vice Chancellor and Provost of the system. Also with us is Dr. Gene Giovannini, President of the Corporate College. So I wanted to acknowledge two of my colleagues that are here tonight as well. The Maricopa Community College Center, Maricopa Community College's Center for Civic Participation and the Office of Government Relations have participated to organize this series of candidates of forums for the Maricopa County Community College District Governing Board. They have engaged the Town Hall for its long history, bringing together the community for civil discourse on issues of state import to help moderate these forums. It is my pleasure tonight to introduce our volunteer moderator, Mr. Mike Widener, a highly experienced Arizona Town Hall moderator. Mike teaches and practices law concurrently and is a part-time government land use official with the City of Phoenix. He occasionally writes academic papers when time permits between the demands of work and teaching assignments. He teaches business law, land use, water law, sports law, corporate law at the Arizona Summit Law School and the University of Phoenix. He is a certified specialist in real estate law through the State Bar of Arizona. Please join me in helping welcome Mike, who will begin our event tonight. Mike.
Well, thank you very much, Dr. Dale. Can you hear me all right? People usually complain that my voice is inaudible, so if at any point you can't hear me, raise your hand or wave your hand or keep it clean. As Dr. Dale said, my name is Mike, and I am here happily tonight as a member of Arizona Town Hall. This is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization that's dedicated to respectful civic engagement, and that has been educating, engaging, and empowering Arizonans to be civic leaders for more than a half century. It's my privilege to be able to work with Town Hall and the Paradise Valley Community College, and I am particularly giving a little thought to this tonight, inspired by the fact that this is the community, part of the community college ideal, isn't it? That the entire community is engaged, not just a student subset, not just a faculty subset, but that the public and all of the stakeholders in the well-being of the community college system are equally participating. Dr. Dale mentioned a minute ago the importance of not only civic engagement, but civil discourse. And when somebody asks me, how do you describe the notion of civil discourse, I usually start with the thoughts of the philosopher Voltaire, who many of you know said that I do not agree with what you are saying, but I will defend to the death your right to say it. If you think about that for a minute or two, that's really a kind of powerful, almost overwhelmingly powerful statement. Consider the idea that there are persons who are not only willing to die, but in fact have died in order that we can have forums just like this one. That tells us something, I think, and something it tells me is that we cannot, when we have forums like this, waste our time. We can't have frivolity, and we can't have outbursts, and we can't have, well, silliness. So, I'm confident that this will be not only civil discourse, but productive, and will accomplish the major goal for tonight. Well, now, what is the major goal for tonight? I think it is to learn about the candidates themselves and about their points of view, and not your points of view per se, although your questions are exceedingly important in sussing out the points of view of the candidates. And of course, we're not particularly interested in what any one candidate thinks another candidate's point of view is. The objective here is for everybody to be able to express themselves freely and fully within the time constraints that are being imposed. So, I think the next thing that is important to do is to thank each of the candidates, Dr. Fred Zook, Ms. Johanna Haver, and Mr. Reyes Medrano, not only for their attendance, but gosh, for caring enough about community colleges in this county to want to spend the time and their personal resources and to invest their best in making this an outstanding community college district. I want to thank also the student volunteers who are here, and I'll talk a little bit more about them in a minute, for their participation and taking time out of their busy student schedules to help me out. I also want to thank 3 members of the district who worked very hard to put this thing together, and their names are Alberto Olivas, Don Wallace, and Donna Winston, and they're here in the room tonight. Should you see them, you might want to thank them. And finally, but not least importantly, I want to thank all of you who came out here tonight in the heat to participate in this very important forum. Now, nobody can do anything anymore without having a process discussion, right? And this is going to be no exception. So I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the ground rules for this evening. The first 10 minutes, we're going to talk among ourselves. We're going to have a dialogue. And the candidates are going to be our most attentive listeners because we're going to try to get to the root of some of the things that are of most concern to you. Now, after that, I'm going to ask the candidates to come up here and be seated, and then we are going to start with the questions and answers. Well, a little bit about how that works. First, the candidates each will have 3 minutes to give an opening statement. Second, I'm going to pose 2 initial questions to each of the candidates, and they're each going to have, in their turn, 2 minutes to respond to those questions. Now, after that, the good stuff is that they will respond to your questions that I will read aloud. How do you submit a question? There are cards in the back of the room. For those of you unfamiliar with cards, this is a card. You can get one at the back of the room. You can write something on it, preferably not card. I've already got one of those. And write your questions as legibly as your handwriting permits, and I shall read them as well as my minimal vision and illiteracy allows. And then the candidates will take turns and will swap out so that one person isn't the first to respond to each one of these questions. And we'll sort of go around like that in a taking turns fashion. Now, why would I ask you to use a card as opposed to just standing up and talking? Well, as you know, if you have to write something down, one moment, please. Good, good. Yes, thanks. If you take a minute to write something down, you usually will organize your thoughts a little bit better, but also it just keeps this from devolving into chaos. And as I said, that's not the definition of civil discourse. There are spotters. What's a spotter? A spotter is a person with better vision than me who, when you fill out your card and raise it up in the air, will come by, pick up your card, and bring it up to me. And I will then take a quick look at it and make sure I will make good sense out of your interesting question and pass it on to the candidates. So turn it into the student spotters, please. If we don't get to your question, because there are so many cards with interesting questions, then I'm going to ask you to do something additional, which is write your personal information on the back of the card if you would like one or all of the candidates to respond to your question. And they will get back to you by whatever contact information you provide, whether it's an email address, a fax number, or a telephone number. All right? Okay. Finally, I would like you, because this program is being taped, to take your telephone or other PDA and put it in the off position. And if you don't know how to render your PDA into the off position, please bring it up here. I have a short and brutish way of making it work for you. And I think it goes without saying, consistent with the whole notion of civil discourse, please refrain from shouting out a rude or otherwise stirring comment. After all, this is being taped. It's being shown to our armed forces overseas, so watch your language. And remember that this is not a forum for personal attacks or to suss out a person's most intimate feelings about things that aren't relevant to the operation of a community college district. All right. Having said that much, I have this question for the candidates preliminarily. Do you understand those rules pretty well? Okay, good. Now, the last part of civic engagement is to remember who we are and what we stand for, and I want you to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. There is the flag. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Okay, so Madam and Sirs, we're going to have opening statements at this point, 3 minutes each. And once again, to introduce you, we have Johanna Haver, Reyes Medrano, and Dr. Fred Zook. And we're going to begin the opening statements with one by Dr. Zook. And Dr. Zook, I'll remind you, as the other candidates, that the student volunteers have timers, and they will hold things up when you have 2, 1, and no minutes left. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And I appreciate the invitation to be here, and I appreciate you showing up, and the TV audience when that becomes available so there can be a wider viewership. I can't help but think about the fall of 2002. President Kranitz asked me to come to her office, and I did. And seated there was James Jers, who was the superintendent of the Paradise Valley District. And she said, I'm asking you gentlemen to co-chair a group that I'm going to call the President's Advisory Council. And Jim and I co-chaired that for over 8 years, and I'm still on that group, and I think we call it the Paradise Valley Community Council or something now. But here we are in the Kranitz Center. It's a beautiful new remodeled and facility, and it just reminded me of that. I appreciate, most of you can understand with a name like Zook to get a chance to go first. My graduating class back in Michigan was only 41 people, but I was last. And I said to the principal, can't we do something about that? And he said, what do you have in mind? And I said, well, maybe the grade point average. And he said, you wouldn't move up. So that's all myth. I would have jumped clear at the top. I believe that my educational experience, meaning my earned degrees, all the way from the doctorate to my baccalaureate degree, and I'll talk about that later because it's in marketing, that I can probably relate as well as anyone to the four stakeholders that we have in this particular situation: the faculty, the students, the parents, and the stakeholders. And I will tell you right now that I have a bias towards the students. My years as dean of students, I suppose, infected me with that. But without students, we're not here. So just forget about having a community college or having ASU or anything else. If you don't have students, you don't have the college. And so it's our responsibility as taxpayers, as citizens, as board members, to make sure that we provide a quality education in appropriate buildings, varied curriculum, etc. There's lots of issues that could be talked about, but I'm going to focus my time on 5 issues, and I'm not going to explain them all in the first 3 minutes, so if you have a question related to that. A couple of them have already been, I've got 30 seconds left. Oh, for goodness sakes. Affordability, graduation rates, growth, economic development, and public and private partnerships. And I am going to, during the evening, talk to you more about marketing because that's critical. So I'll look forward to participating. Thank you for coming.
Thank you, Dr. Zook. Now let's hear from Mr. Reyes-Medrano.
Good evening, and thank you all for being here. And let me just tell you a little bit about why I'm running, who I am. I'm a native of the Valley. Very few of us around, but I was born and raised in the west side, a little town called Tolleson, and I still live on the west side. I live on First Drive. Can't seem to cross Central for some reason. But I am an educator. I've taught in the district for 28 years. Actually have worked in Maricopa at different positions, different levels. I've been an administrator. And I've served on a variety of positions, including president of the Faculty Association and, again, many committees. So I'm very, very familiar with the district. I'm a graduate of Glendale Community College. And even though this may not have any relevance, we were the state national baseball champs in 1968. So, and again, I just had to throw that out there because, but I've grown up in the district. I've had opportunities in the district that I never would have had. I never would have had the lifestyle I've had. I never would have had the career I had it not been for the community colleges. And I'm very, very committed to students, obviously, as you know, being in a classroom for 28 years with these students. And I know that you hear faculty complaining about students all the time. They're this, they're that. But let me tell you, for some reason, you grow to love them. And in my case, that is certainly true. And they are a priority to me. And I think that is what has to come first. Any decision, any issue that is brought before a board has to consider students and what is the impact on students. And that will be a major issue with me. And again, I owe everything I have and everything I am to this district. And I want to run and I want to be able to impact the district in positive ways because I feel a very strong commitment. This is home for me. And this is why I'm here. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we'll hear from Ms. Johanna Haber.
Like Mr. Medrano, I'm a retired teacher. I taught for 32 years, mostly in public schools. My subjects were German, Latin, reading, English, and English as a second language pretty much in that order. Also, I was an exchange teacher to Germany for a year, and I also was a Phoenix sister city teacher, and I was in Japan for 2 years in that capacity. Like Mr. Reyes, I put students first. I always have, I always will. And I believe, if anything, the tendency has been to maybe dumb down the instruction for them too much. Certainly in the high schools where I taught, I felt that they could be more challenged. And at that point, I was teaching mostly English learners. I'm very respectful of the community college system that we have here. I've appreciated it since I moved here in 1972. My daughter went to Phoenix College, and hundreds of my students, mostly English language learners, also went to community colleges. My daughter and many of those English learners graduated, went on to universities, and pursued careers that were very interesting to them. So I really believe in what is going on here. When I found out about the many problems, and it goes beyond the security breach, there are problems with the costs going up quite rapidly in the last 10 years. And as the student over here mentioned, the cost of books is absolutely outrageous. I think that students are being taken advantage of. I don't see any excuse for this. There have been consultants who've given good suggestions for bringing down the costs, and they were not paid much attention to. In fact, the way I understand it, they sort of tried to cover up that they weren't going to follow the consultants' ideas. They were advised to do that in a very, I would say, pernicious sort of way. And so there are some very definite problems in this community college district. I think we've gotten a little bit off course. And I believe that my experiences and probably my determination, once I feel that something is wrong and it has to do with students, I don't give up. I would fight for these students to make sure school becomes affordable and that their instruction is quality instruction. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Haver. All right, we will now begin our rounds of questions and answers. Again, keeping in mind that there is a time limit of 2 minutes per answer. Some of these questions are more philosophical. Some of them are downright specific. Some of these questions actually were submitted online, and I will intersperse those that come from the audience this evening. The first question and the initial opportunity to respond goes to Mr. Medrano. What do you understand the community college idea to be historically? How can community colleges complete that historic mission when the state refuses to fund them and ever higher tuition is imposed on students who already are economically distressed?
Okay, well, I think that the philosophy of the community colleges, and historically, I can certainly speak historically because I started with the district in 1975, has always been access and open enrollment for our community. The idea of how can we continue keeping it affordable is obviously a very puzzling one, and it's extremely challenging. But I think our biggest challenge right now is how do we, somebody posed the question in the audience that how do we go to these legislators and convince them that they should be funding us? I mean, come on. We have 250,000 students a year go through our doors. We have we provide a tremendous service to this community. And yet it's not, Mr. Zender mentioned it. He went online to find out that we were the largest community college in the country. We're the best kept secret in the state. It shouldn't be like that. We, not only do we have a large number of students, we provide a quality education, and we could do even better. And we need to convince these legislatures, why are you shortchanging us? What is your point? You people, if we can get enough community support, when I say community support, I'm talking stakeholders in our community, organizations that profit or that benefit from what we do at the community college. The skills we provide to our students that go out there and provide these businesses with a trained workforce. Why should they have to be training their unskilled workers? Because that's what they get. They get it a lot of times unskilled. We can do that if we only have a better connection to our business community, and we need to work on that. And we need to go to the legislature and say, hey, we're here, and we're one of the best. Cut this out. Give us some funding, for Christ's sake. Thank you.
Oh, I beg your pardon. Ms. Haver.
Everybody would like to have more money, including me, including probably everybody in this room. However, it's limited, and it certainly is limited with our legislature. They already have to pay millions more dollars to K through 12 education, and we should all care about that, because the students from the K through 12 come to the junior colleges, and many of them end up in remedial classes. I think in some schools it's as many as 60%. And so I question the wisdom of expecting the legislature to take care of this problem. I think we have to look at how we're spending the money and come up with better ways. And again, always putting the students' education first. And also considering the community. What can they afford? So it's not an easy problem to resolve, but to think that the solution is to lobby the legislators over and over again for something they don't have. I think they're already short about $1 billion. And so I question that idea. Where would they get the money? We're not allowed to go into debt the way the federal government does. We can't print our own money.
All right, thank you, Dr. Zook.
Well, I don't think I agree with that. Frankly, I'm embarrassed at the way the legislature has treated the community colleges. I'm looking at a pie chart here that says that about 60% of our money comes from property taxes, 33% from tuition fees, 1% comes from the state. And they passed their own legislation several years ago that they were going to give us more, and they just keep cutting it and cutting it. But I do want to spend a little bit of time on the historical part of the community college, because I think it is positioned as one of the most unique institutions in our higher education system. And if you remember, it's not that long ago, community colleges were junior colleges, and their classes were taught in high schools. It's only recently that we've morphed into the community college, and we've have a variety of curriculum. But what I've said to people from the very beginning, go to a community college campus. Just go and observe. You're going to see high school kids there. You're going to see people in their 80s there. You're going to see people doing workforce development. You're going to see people working on their associate degrees. You're going to see high school kids getting advanced courses, so when they come to the colleges, whether it's the community college or a four-year college, they're going to have freshman, maybe sophomore status. It is a beautiful thing to come to a community college campus and see what goes on and talk to the students about what they're experiencing. It's fun.
All right, thank you. Thanks, Dr. Zook. We're going to move on now to some more questions from the audience. Here's a down and dirty one. What revenue sources besides real property tax and student tuition increases could be employed to replace the funding cuts of the legislature? First up, Ms. Haber.
Well, I would suggest that we look at the advice given by a consulting firm a few years ago. And according to investigative reporter Mark Flatt, and you might have heard of his won a lot of awards. He's right now with the Washington Examiner. There are many cuts that could be made. And for instance, $20 million by standardizing equipment and centralizing information, reforming procurement practices, which I understand has been done to some degree, but it could be done in a better way. In fact, I heard it's not even put up for bids. That's preposterous. Outsourcing custodial and groundskeeping jobs. And I know at one of the board meetings there was a discussion, and they feel that they need the in-house custodial services. And I didn't quite understand what their argument was, that they were more dependable or something of that sort. And if it saves a lot of money and it's competitive, I think it could work. Because if it's competitive and the people are not doing a good job, you can fire them. Another way of saving money is to give up this idea of increasing the residential faculty to 60%. I don't understand the rationale for that. I don't see how that helps students. It makes for maybe a friendlier atmosphere in the departments because everybody knows each other. As a teacher, I can understand that. But there, in our particular valley, we have so many noted professors who are retired and only want to teach a class or two. And we don't pay them very much. Adjunct teachers receive very little. And so my time is almost up. I could go on and on. There are many ways that we could save money by cutting costs instead of increasing the spending the way we've been doing.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Haber. Next is Dr. Zook.
Well, first of all, I don't think that we need to nickel and dime ourselves. That's not how you dream up new revenue. I had a gentleman say one time, you don't become a success by cutting your expenses. You know, you've got to spend money to do things. And that's why 3 of my things that I mentioned, growth, economic development, and public and private partnerships, we need to think big, and we need to think about things we've never thought of. Luckily, when I say public and private partnership, we are doing something already, but I bet there's not very many people in this room know about it. President Dale, is it called the corporate center, the corporate college, something like that? And we've contacted the Marriott, and I'm not going to list them all because I can't. But they're sending people here to learn how to become managers and learn how to do, you know, things that they want their employees to do. And they're paying us money to do it. The other one I want to talk about, which makes a lot of sense, and a couple people in the audience talked about, is growth. Isn't it embarrassing that we have to sell this public community college system to our people? I talked to a person who was on the board, and she said the most embarrassing thing that ever came while she was on the board was when we have bond elections, we have to go out and explain to people what the community college system is. They don't even know what a gem that we have here. And the other one that I want to mention is growth. Grow your revenues by growing more students. How many times have you read in the paper now that the public is beginning to finally catch on and mom and dad are saying, you know, you might think of the community college before you go to the four-year institution. And as it gets wider and wider disparity in tuitions, you know, $86 a credit hour when ASU is about 10 grand a year, mom and dad are going to say, go to the community college and get started.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Zook. That takes us to Mr. Medrano.
Okay, well, I think first of all, of course, we could look into our processes and into our resources that we have internally, and perhaps in some areas make better use of our funds. But I'm very much in favor of creating those business connections, those community connections, where we can, as I mentioned before, how many businesses out there? I'm talking big businesses who bring a lot of employees into the valley. How many businesses out there spend an enormous amount of money training their employees? They put a lot of time, a lot of resources, a lot of money into. Why can't we connect with these folks and tell them, tell us what you need. Tell us what kind of skills you want your employee to walk into through your doors with. Maybe we can provide some of that. Come in and set up some of your labs in our institutions. Set up a lab that has your equipment that they're going to work on when they get out of here. You can make that investment. You can invest in our system because we're here. And we're willing to do that. But we need to make that connection. We need to get out there and we need to connect with our business community. And again, we also need to get out there and yeah, we do have to sell ourselves. And it is embarrassing probably, but the fact is that very few people really know what we're all about. We need to get out there and show people this is who we are, this is what we are. We provide an excellent education. We're a great springboard for going on to universities, and we're not very expensive. Although I wish we were less expensive. And when I started school, it was 0 tuition. Unfortunately, what options does the board have at this point? Because we don't have any other sources to go for funding. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Now we're going to take a question that was submitted online. And it goes like this. MCCCD uses interest-based negotiation, sometimes IBN for short, in order to negotiate its employee contracts. Do you support this idea? And what would you do to continue supporting it? Or if you don't support it, how would you change this approach to contract making? First up is Dr. Zor.
Well, I'm not sure I understand the question. When you negotiate faculty salaries and staff salaries, what is the point, whether it's MCCD or I don't understand that point. You have to negotiate in good faith. And you have to come to the table and be honest and forthcoming. You're not. It's embarrassing, again, I hate to keep using the term, but Johanna made the point. We don't make a lot of money. Well, we don't make a lot of money in education no matter where you sit, whether you're a second grade teacher or you're a university professor or what. And that in itself is embarrassing. And so I'm not sure how I could come to a table and say, we can't pay you anymore, or we're not going to pay you anymore, or we're going to give you a 2% reduction in your pay. Negotiations is a two-way street, and you expect the faculty and the staff to come with honest and good credentials and good reasoning and be honest with what they want and what they think is possible. I just don't get the question about whether you call it MCCD. The one thing I did learn in running for this position, by the time you say, I'm a candidate for the Maricopa County Community College Board, they've lost interest. I should have run for governor. Of course, we already had too many people running for governor, but I think the next time I'm going to run for Senate. It's just one word. So you may understand the question better. Is he next, or?
He could be.
Okay.
Am I next?
As a matter of fact, you are.
Actually, I don't understand the question quite well.
I don't either.
Let's move on to the
No,
next.
I was on the negotiating team several years when I was FEC Faculty Executive Council president. And our negotiation was quite simple. You create a team that's faculty-based, and you create an administrative team, and you come together and you throw your wants and needs on the table, and then together, supposedly together, you go to the board with, this is what we decided on as a group. I never had a lot of faith in that, and this is no secret because I've said this many times to many people. I never had a lot of faith in that process. I think that we needed more input from the stakeholders into the negotiation than what we were getting. Now, interest-based negotiations, again, I don't know the very specific details. There's some people in the audience here who are very involved with that and know. But I know it worked pretty well this year, so it must be pretty good, because it worked well for faculty. Anything that is inclusive, any system that is more inclusive of the employee groups and their communication with the board, I'm all for that. Now, I would have to go in and I would really have to tear that thing apart to understand what it is, and I know exactly who to ask. So that's what I understand of the interest-based negotiation.
Thanks. Ms. Haber?
Speaking of salaries, teachers' salaries, they are limited in this district because so much of the money is top-heavy and goes to administration. I don't know if many of you realize that, but less than 40% of the general fund goes to instruction. And in our K through 12 system, it's 56% goes to instruction. And so what about all these jobs? I just question whether we need such a large administration. My experience has been the bigger the administration, the less is accomplished in the school district in general. And I can bring up Paradise Valley Unified School District is one that really improved when it cut down its administration. And so I would like to look at that. I noticed someone had a job in charge of cooperative learning. That's a strategy. I can hardly imagine that is a full-time job, and it's probably someone who receives a pretty good salary as an administrator. It just, maybe there's something more to it, but I know what cooperative learning is. It's nothing I'm particularly fond of. It's a strategy that does work for some people, so I certainly have nothing against it. But I am for paying teachers well. Most definitely. I was a teacher myself. And I think it can be done again by looking at how money is being spent at the top, maybe.
I hope they don't cut the salaries of the board members.
Okay.
They can't go much lower.
That's pretty hard, yeah.
0 is pretty bad, isn't it? I hope people appreciate what that is.
All right, the next question will begin with Mr. Medrano. What are the top 3 qualifications to be a member of the MCCCD governing board, and which of any of those 3 qualifications do you especially possess?
Okay, well, I think one of them would be that someone should have the commitment to the community college system. And obviously, and as I explained in my opening statements, I have a very strong commitment to the community colleges. 2, I think a person that is running for this position should really, really have a strong commitment to students, because I believe that every single decision, every issue that comes before the board must consider the impact that that decision is going to have on our student body. And thirdly, I think that a person who is in this position should understand and appreciate the importance of a strong employee group. And I'm talking of all the way from faculty down to the maintenance staff, because every single employee that works for a college contributes to the success of a student. And I think that a board member should understand and appreciate the fact that Maricopa Community College, in my opinion, and I've visited other colleges, I've worked at other colleges, in my opinion, Maricopa Community College is some of the finest, most ethical professionals that any institution could hope to have. They're highly trained, they're very committed, and they're just excellent at what they do. And I think that somebody who comes in this position should understand that and should appreciate that. Thank you.
Ms. Haver.
I agree with Mr. Medrano. I'm also teacher-centered. Every single decision should be based on how it will affect the students, primarily their instruction. And then the second consideration should be costs. And as far as the negotiation that goes on, that can be very, very difficult, very tricky, in that you want to pay the teachers as much as you can, but you can't give up certain benefits to students in order to do that. And I have seen that happen, where the teachers union negotiated so they didn't have to spend some more hours than such with the students, and they didn't want anybody to break the rule. We're only going to do so much, and if they want us to do more, they have to pay us more, that kind of thing. I don't see where that does anybody any good. So like I said, it's very tricky, and you have to have good representation on both sides. In fact, I'd say more than on both sides, from several sides, as I think Mr. Medrano mentioned, and so you get everybody's idea and you figure out a good solution. And so that's what I would recommend, but always ask the question, well, how will this affect the students, and how will it affect their instruction? I noticed that there's a move to make sure all students pass all classes. Now that's ridiculous. That's one of those ideas that all the children are above average, and this a good class will have some kids fail. That's just part of real life. And so I think we have to be realistic. We have to use common sense.
All right, thank you. Dr. Zur.
Thank you very much. Obviously, we're all going to answer this based on our credentials. And I think that one of the things that I present is educational experience. I have an earned PhD in higher education administration. I have been a college president. I have been a provost. I have been a dean of students. I have been a professor. I've been a director of marketing. I even started out as a high school teacher. So that breadth and depth of experience, it's longer than I want to tell you. The second thing is, I just think that almost anything you do, you've got to market yourself. And I'm not sure we do that as well as we probably can. We're 10 individually accredited colleges by the Higher Learning Commission. I'm not sure people understand that and the importance of that. That's something we've got to talk about. And the third point in my list would be, it is critical that we understand what it means to be a board member. I have been on so many boards, you don't even want to hear them all. But I can tell you that when I hear candidates, and I'm not picking on our candidates, I'm talking about governors or whatever, I'm going to do this. Excuse me, there's going to be 7 members of the community college board. What are you going to do individually? I have been very careful not to promise anybody anything. Now, if I can come up with 4 people that'll agree with me on the board, then we can do something. But board membership and board work, when I was president of the university, the boards were all CEOs and people who make decisions every day. They sit in their office and make decisions. And they come to the board, and now, wow, they've got to get other people to agree with them. They've got to talk about things that they don't talk about when they're sitting in the office talking to themselves. It's different. So we need to think about that when we elect this person, and we might have 1, 2, 3, 4. We could have 5 new members of the board in this election, based on our 2 new members at large, and then 3 districts electing people. That's kind of scary, I think. The chancellor probably thinks it is too.
All right, thank you. Here's the next question, first for Ms. Haver. What will your position be about enabling undocumented dreamers to attend college and pursue their career goals?
Well, I taught English learners for, I think, a total of about 18 years, if you include the time that I had a reading program in Avondale. And I believe all children should be provided the opportunity to continue his or her education. In fact, I approached Tom Horn on this issue. I said, I can't understand you're doing this. How can high school teachers encourage students to do their best if it's not possible for them to go on to college? And that's primarily what has happened, and I don't agree with that. I think there is a way that this problem could have been solved, and I wonder why nobody came up with it. The out-of-state tuition is quite high. These kids have to pay out-of-state tuition. So if out-of-state tuition were lowered, then it wouldn't be such a problem. Presently, it's about 3 times as much as in-state. So, I mean, it's really all that really can be done, because a law passed in this state that keeps these kids from attending our colleges, paying in-state tuition. And so to me, that would be an obvious solution. I just can't bring myself to not include all people who want to go on and be educated. I cannot agree with keeping anyone away from an education.
Thank you, Dr. Zook.
Someone help me. Are these the DACA students that we're talking about? It is? That's what I thought. Well, first of all, I wholeheartedly agree with Johanna. These kids have gone to our high schools. They've done well. What is the point with an artificial barrier that they can't attend our community colleges on our lower tuition rate? However, it is in the court, and the court will make a decision, and it's not for us to, I mean, we can disagree, but we're a public board, and if the court say yes, we do it, and if the court says no, we also do it. I mean, who can sit here and say, well, we don't care what the court says? That's not an option. Let's hope that they'll reason this and come up with that. I attended a board meeting where, gosh, there must have been 30 students come in and thank the board for allowing them to go to school, because the board had taken a stance and they checked with lawyers and people in the know, and that was what they came up with. And these young people appreciated this. You couldn't believe it. And I was impressed with the presentation they made that night. And so I hope they can do it. I really do hope they can do it.
Thanks, Mr. Medrano.
Well, let's see, how do I answer that? Obviously, I am very much in favor of the Dreamers getting as much of an opportunity to attend school as anybody else. These folks came here and most of the time not through their choice. They were born and raised. They were raised here. This is all they know, as this is their home. They went through our educational system. Many of them, I don't know if any of you have kept up with that Carl Hayden group of high school kids that have won national championships in robotics, they've been recognized nationally, and yet these kids can't go on to the university because of some of these laws that have been passed. So I'm very much in support of providing avenues for these dreamers, that they get as educated as possible. We need as many people educated as we can get. We don't want uneducated people out there, because it does not serve the community. So that is obviously, I'm very much in favor of providing these avenues for dreamers.
Okay, thanks. On to the next question, first for Dr. Zook. What do you understand about, and what are your views on, the concept of one Maricopa?
I am glad you asked that, because I am so excited about one Maricopa. If someone would have said, you know, what would your legacy, what would you like your legacy to be on the board? I wish I could go back a couple years and say, I want us to do one Maricopa, and then have it become a reality. I don't know if you understand what that means to students. It means that when they apply to go to a college, they apply to the system once. And so they can come to PV and they can go here a year, and then if they decide to go to Scottsdale, they can go over there without reapplying. Secondly, it means they apply for financial aid once. If you're not a parent or a student, you don't know what that headache is, you've got some enjoyment coming in your life. It is, I don't even want to use words, but to apply once instead of every time. And if you talk to the community college people, students move around all the time. This is not a new idea. And then when you graduate, you get one transcript. You don't have to say, PV, send my transcript to Intel. Glendale, send my transcript to Glendale. Mesa, send the transcript to Mesa, or to whatever. You have one. And I think it's a great system. And my understanding is it's coming into fruition. I'm not sure it's fully organized and like it wants to be, but that is a great deal. And I'd like to have had authorship and say, I thought of that. I hope you support it. And I know parents you would.
Thank you. Mr. Medrano.
From what I understand, I was originally on the committee, and it is, I think it's still in committee. If you know how committees work, then you understand that. The original committee, I served on it for about a year, and that was about 4 years ago. Obviously, it's a very a good thing for the colleges because it's a good thing for students. I think one of the fears that a lot of the different colleges have is that they'll lose their autonomy. I don't think that's going to happen. I really don't think that's going to happen. I think the system can be put in place and yet maintain some autonomy for all the 10 colleges. All it says is, look, if you, like Mr. Zook said, it really makes it very convenient for students because, you know how it is. Sometimes you move to a different part of the city and, you want to continue going to school. It used to be that it quite a headache because you have to transfer your stuff, especially financial aid students. Financial aid students have to jump through a ton of hoops just to get their original award. Now imagine you've got your award, you're all set at PVCC, all of a sudden you get a job downtown, you got to move to PC. What happens to your financial aid? It gets hung up. So how do you pay for your tuition? How do you pay for your books, etc.? This process that's being worked on, and it will come to fruition, will not allow that to happen. It will allow a student, like Mr. Zook said, to have all of your credits in one place, have your financial aid transferable easily. So it's much better. And again, anything that makes things more comfortable and better for the student, I'm for it. Thank you.
Thanks, Ms. Haver.
Well, as someone who really disdains bureaucracy, I think it sounds like a very good idea. I think of myself, I've taken courses at Glendale Community College, at Phoenix College, here at Paradise Valley Community College, Rio Salado, all those 4 colleges. And the other day I thought I would like to maybe have some transcripts. I had some from Phoenix College, I found something from Glendale, but I wanted the whole package. And it seems this would make it possible that you could take courses and kind of pick and choose which college and which teachers. Is that correct? Is that the way it works?
I'm sorry, how?
Well, I just kind of could figure out from what both of you said that Maricopa 1 would make it possible for a student to take one class at one college and another class at another college. I think that's a great idea. I'm definitely for it.
Okay, thanks. Next, this question will start with Mr. Medrano. Do you believe in the step salary schedule for the faculty, meaning that each year of viable employment, the faculty should move up the salary scale up to, say, 15 years, at which point the salary is capped?
I believe it's capped at 13. I don't know if I'm wrong about that or not. I was capped, certainly, but of course I've been around 30 years, yeah. But absolutely, I believe in the step process. I think that as an employee, you should be paid for your experience, and you should be paid for your skills. The idea that and again, there were some some fiscal considerations when steps were frozen. But I still feel that strongly that faculty who are serving the district for long term, and keep in mind now, as they serve the district, they're continually educating themselves. It's not like faculty come in and then, you know, their education is never over. You continue to educate to make yourself a better professor, a better instructor. And I think that should be recognized. And I think the STEP process recognizes that. And I think it should be in place. I think it should be something that's part of the, that should be obviously part of the negotiations. So I'm very much in favor of it. Yes.
Thanks, Ms. Haber.
Well, I believe the STEP system is very similar to what I experienced in high school education. And it's got its pros, it's got its cons. And I'm not sure I'm not sure exactly how it works at the community college level, but I fear that maybe the adjunct instructors are left out of it because they don't have that ability to move up the salary schedule, as I understand it, and I think that's unfortunate. It's something that needs to be examined, and I think that there should also be evaluation should be considered in moving people up the salary schedule. There is no evidence in research that this actually improves instruction. So with that in mind, I'm just sort of in the middle on that, and I'd have to look at it more closely and see what other school districts, community college districts are doing regarding seniority.
All right, thank you. The next question we will begin with.
I didn't answer that one, Mike.
So you did not, Dr. Zook. Go ahead, take a swing.
Take a swing.
Yes, sir. Sorry.
Well, all of us are in the same boat. We need to sit down and have the kind of full explanation of what happens. But let me tell you that I'm not opposed to the capped or step salary. However, but it's got to have more. You have got to pay people for their excellence. You just do. And for a college president to talk about paying for people for doing a better job, it's so much easier to just say, if you've been here 10 years, that's what you're going to make. There's a lady in this audience right now who works with public school teachers, and they work and they work and they work to become better. And when they become better, they get more money every year. Now, part of that's been funded by a grant, and that helps public schools. If you think the state's broke, it's talk to most superintendents. So, you know, there are teachers who are absolutely outstanding, and they should be paid more. You don't become better just because you're a year older. But I do think you need to respond to people in the STEP system so that I'm not advocating doing away with it. I'm saying have it, but recognize that Professor so-and-so is doing so. And in fact, I was gonna do this, and I can't remember. But President Dale, I think you've got 3 faculty members that have been recognized nationally for their teaching and research and writing, whatever they are. Those people are outstanding, or they wouldn't be recognized nationally. Hope you pay them a little bit more.
Okay, thanks. On the next question, we'll start with Ms. Haber. Community colleges are supposed to be 2-year completion-driven institutions, and yet we see increasing numbers of students who are graduating in 3, 4, 5, or even a longer number of years. Do you have any specific initiatives that you'd like to implement to increase and encourage timely graduation?
That's a good question. I know that we have many, as I mentioned before, that have to take remedial classes, and so probably want to go to the source over that, meaning the high schools, and see if something, we couldn't help them out. I'm also aware that we have some pretty good programs in this community college district for remedial students, and so maybe we should share what we have found to work. What I saw was quite amazing in the minutes, the results of, I think it was 2 of the community colleges, South Mountain and Scottsdale, and the results were quite astounding for kids who had reading problems. And so if maybe we can do something with the high schools so they wouldn't have to spend so much time on remediation and so much money on remediation, then we could help the students to complete more hours more rapidly and graduate at a faster pace. And the other thing is that all of this would help. It would help a lot to bring down tuition. It would help in marketing the community college system. It would make it easier for students to finish if they didn't have to pay such a large amount of money. I mean, if we could lower the tuition, I believe, in fact, I believe we can lower the tuition. We just have to be smart about it. I think that will solve a lot of the problems that we're talking about tonight.
Okay, Dr. Zook?
Well, I disagree with that statement. Who says that they're supposed to graduate in 2 years? I really, that just offends me. We don't say that the ASU is supposed to graduate someone in 4 years. They sure as heck don't. And I'm not picking on ASU. You can take any school in the country. And by my comment about who said it, the federal government doesn't say it. I can't quote you right now, but they use a system where if you completed your 2 years, your associate degrees in 4 years or some figure like that, then the college is doing its job. I talked to a student here tonight. He can't graduate in 2 years. He can't afford it. He's working and he's doing other things. Remember what I said? You got high school kids and you got 85-year-old people coming to school. This isn't their main focus. Maybe it is, and if it is, God bless them. But this idea that you're supposed to graduate in 2 years, I'll bet that there's, here, I'm not a betting person, but if you looked at most of the community colleges, probably the people that are trying to get associate's degrees are not the largest numbers or percentages on the campus. They're not. I don't think they are. There's so-and-so's taking a mechanics course. That's one course he or she's going to take. Someone else is going to take 2 or 3 courses. That's what they're going to take. They're not getting a degree. And well, all these high school kids, there's hundreds of kids from PV and Deer Valley coming to this college. They're not going to graduate. They're not even in the process of trying to graduate 2 years. So that's a false assumption, I think, and it offends me, because so many people just cannot. And if they're being held up to that kind of a standard, that's very unfortunate. Stop. You're holding that upside down. You're assuming I can read upside down? Oh, that's better.
All right, thank you, Dr. Zook. Mr. Madrano.
Well, I graduated in 3 years from the community college. I had to drop out and I had to go to work, and so I couldn't finish in 3 years now. And that's not to say that it'd be great to finish in 2 years. But here's the problem with those completion rates. They're talking about students should be out. Your completion rates are terrible. This is what when I was FEC and I was the liaison to the legislature. That was the argument they presented me. Well, your students don't graduate on time. Well, your students, your graduation rates are terrible. Well, our students aren't necessarily here to graduate. They're here to take 1 class, 2 classes, or they're here to take a semester and move on to the university. Yet, this is the argument they present to us when they talk about funding. You don't do a good job. This is crazy. Somebody needs to take a good look at that. What is our success ratio? Don't measure us the way they've been measuring us. That's stupid, and it's unfair. Now, in terms of remedial courses, I think there's something can be done, because I've met so many students in my years that starting out with remedial courses, they've had to take 3 semesters of math before they could take a regular math course. Look at the time that that consumes. There's a way to package, that you can package remedial courses that perhaps maybe a student who comes into a remedial program can, perhaps by the time they test, they can test out of the one they've been in to begin with. And they don't have to spend a year and a half taking remedial courses. Maybe they can get the remedial work done in 1 year or even 1 semester. There's some students that can do that. We need to look at those kinds of options. Thank you.
All right, thank you. On the next question, we're going to begin with Dr. Zook. Dr. Zook, what is your approach for working with people who have opinions that are very different from yours? Kindly give an example, if you so desire.
Well, you don't have 2 minutes to ask me that question. I want you to take a look at some material that are on a table out there. And one of the things in my background was I was a city councilman and a mayor of a medium-sized city in Kansas. And I can't tell you the number of times that I've had people disagree with what I was trying to do or trying to explain. And some of the people are just unreasonable. We had a guy show up every meeting. I know how you can save so much money. Just get rid of the police department. Oh, that's great. He was a retail owner, and first time his store was burglarized, he had our heads. I approach it by listening, and I approach it by saying, I gave a young man some advice about how to stay married longer. I said, one of the things you want to say when you're having a disagreement is, I never thought of it that way. Well, if somebody comes up and they're after my head, I can say, well, I've never thought of it that way. So you do need to listen to people. Everyone that disagrees with you is not automatically stupid. Tend to be, but not automatically. I would really have fun. You want to talk to me afterwards. But it wouldn't be life if it wasn't, people disagreeing. And I do want to make a comment. I'm guessing, but I'll bet I'm right. The amount of time we spend in board meetings, in actual board meetings, is minuscule compared to the number of hours we spend outside meeting with the various 10 college presidents. You think they're all going to agree with me? I doubt it. You come to the Paradise Valley group, and they're not all going to agree with me. And you talk to students, and they're not all going to agree with me. So that's life. And hopefully you are well-grounded in your opinions, and not just opinions. They're factual. Thanks. Up, right side up. Gotcha.
Okay, Mr. Medrano.
Okay, well, again, listen, but let me tell you where I learned that. I have served on the city council in a town, and I was vice mayor. I was also the president of the K-9 school district. I was a board president, and I was only 24, 25 years old when that happened, and served till I was about 30. Well, I was young, and I was a little immature, and what I learned when I was in those positions was, look, take your emotions, put them over here for at least while the meeting's going on, and listen to people. Because you can't rationalize. You can't be rational when you're emotional. If you're angry and you're trying to deal with somebody, it blocks reason. It's just like being in love. When you're in love, you block reason, and you do stupid things. So no, yeah, she is.
Would you raise
not you, hon. Anyway, you can't. You have to be a good listener. You have to take in what everybody else has to offer. Everybody has something to offer. Everybody does. Not everybody's stupid, believe me. So you listen. You become a good listener. When you become a good listener, then you can rationalize and you can analyze and you can provide good input into whatever meeting you're in. But you got to listen first, and you got to listen with an open mind. Open mind, listening, And I have been accused of being overly patient. Some people have said, you're just too damn patient. Well, you know what? It's paid off. It really has. I've always had success in boards that I served on, and leadership positions I've had. Thank you.
Ms. Haver.
I wrote I wrote My Turn and community columns for the Arizona Republic for about 10 years. And it all started at Central High School. And I was upset because the teachers union had forced out one of the best principals I'd ever had. And so I wrote an article that was supposed to be a letter to the editor, but they turned it into a column, and that's where is what began my writing columns. And I was critical that the teachers union protected incompetence, and I was critical about the administration, that they weren't running the district as they should, like a business. And then I was also critical of the legislature because they weren't following through with the need to improve the buildings in the state at the time. This was in the mid-90s. And I had quite a reaction. I had death threats over that column. And after that, nobody reacted as strongly, and it was somewhat of a disappointment. I found that I rather enjoyed having people oppose what I had to say, and sometimes they would change my mind, and that became pretty much what I got out of it. I would put out my point of view very sincerely, and I would offer my reasoning for my conclusions. I always had, well, this is what I think, and this is why. And then I would get responses, and sometimes it was just name calling, which I wrote a column about that, about name calling and how ineffective it was. And so I rather like dissension. I think it's necessary because all of us can get caught up in some kind of way of thinking that isn't quite right. And I like to question myself, and I appreciate people who question my point of view. And so, anyway, that's how I feel about it.
All right, thank you. Just to stir things up a little bit, let me ask a couple of questions now, and I'll ask you to respond in a minute or less. Hopefully these are the sorts of questions that are directed to that kind of thing. So first, for Mr. Medrano, what can you do to develop a more diverse climate on this campus and in the district generally?
Well, I think diversity is very, very important to me. I think a diverse institution, employee and student, enriches the institution. I think what you can do, and I think the community college system is pretty good in terms of diversity. But I think what needs to happen is we need to recognize what is happening to our demographics and be proactive about some programs and some policies that we can institute. Well, because we know what's coming. We know that there's going to be a highly diverse population that's going to be in our communities, period. And of course that means that our Maricopa Community College is going to increase in diversity in students and hopefully as well in staff and employees. So what can we do? Let's get our thinking caps up and on and start thinking about what we can do proactively to be ready for these changes.
Okay, thanks. Let's see. Ms. Haver.
I believe that diversity has to happen in a natural sort of way. I don't believe in forcing it. When you force it, then certain children are treated as less than because, well, you're here because you're a minority and you're not as good a student as the rest of us. I really oppose that point of view. That said, there are many ways you can attract the students who need the education. It doesn't have to be specifically for a particular group. We're all Americans. And I taught mostly Hispanic kids for 18 years. And I remember someone complaining, well, we need to have more Hispanic teachers. Well, my students liked me very much. And so they didn't agree with that point of view. So I think we can make things attractive without addressing a person's race.
Okay, thanks, Dr. Zook.
Well, I think you first break down the walls. If you see discrimination or something going on that's wrong, I agree with Mr. Medrano. We're becoming an increasingly diverse population, and if the community colleges aren't the leadership in that, and I'll put the onus right on the administration, the president, the deans of students, the academic deans, all of those people ought to be the leaders in that, or faculty. If they see something going on, bring it to someone's attention and talk about it and say that's not what we are, that's not the way we behave, and we have to walk the talk. You can't be one way personally and another way when you come to work at the college. And unfortunately, we see that nationally too often. They're two different people in the classroom, and then they act crazy when they're out picketing something or demanding something. So let's work together and let's provide some leadership. If we don't provide the leadership, our students won't pick it up.
Okay, thanks. Next question. Please tell me whether you agree or disagree with this proposition. At 10 colleges, the district has too many community colleges that have subpar enrollment. Would you be in favor of shutting down one or more of the community colleges or programs at the community colleges to save resources? Ms. Haber.
Interesting question. Well, you have to look at it from many different angles, and if it's a cost saver, that's an important issue, because like I said, we want to lower tuition, and lowering tuition would solve a lot of the problems that we have. And so I'm inclined to favor consolidation, but then I would have to see I'd have to hear the other arguments. As we were saying before, you always want to be challenged. I'd want to be challenged on that.
Thank you. Dr. Zook?
I doubt whether we should close any of the campuses because, first of all, one of the things you talk about cost of education is accessibility. You're going to close PV and make someone drive to Gilbert? I don't think so. I'm not going to be uncivil, but I just don't think making a statement to lower tuition is the answer to all of our questions. We can do lots of things and not just step off that cliff. The other thing is the colleges are doing an excellent job of not duplicating. In other words, we don't need fire science programs in 10 community colleges. We don't need nursing programs in 10 community colleges. And so a lot of the community colleges, Scottsdale and Mesa, just flip-flopped here not too long ago and said, okay, we'll do this one, we'll do that one. Whoops, sorry. So that is going to take some looking at and decision-making. Stop.
Okay, Mr. Medrano.
Okay, well, no, I would not be in favor of closing a college. Over the years that I've been in the system, going back to 1975, you'll notice that it's like the stock market. It goes up and down. There are different eras when different colleges are at the top, and then they taper off or they fall a little bit. The other colleges are extremely low. The next decade they'll pick up. So how are you going to make a decision as to which college to close down? No, and again, I'm a strong believer in accessibility. We're a large county. There's people who would have to travel, an hour and a half to get to a school when they don't have access to a school closer to them. So it'd be very difficult to make decisions on which colleges to close because, again, enrollment will go up and down. There are waves. Okay, thank you.
Thanks. The next question requires you to take out your pencil, maybe. I'm going to read 4 categories of folk. And the questioner asks that you rank these 4 categories in the order you feel are your most important constituents as a board member. And here are the 4 categories: students, faculty, the district staff and administration, the tax-paying public. And the questioner says, no fair, ranking them as all equal. First up, Dr. Zook.
Students, number 1. I made that clear in my opening comment. If we don't have students, if we're not providing curricula, we're not providing good facilities, then why are we here? You know, so students are number 1. I would say the public is number 2. We are responsible not only just to Maricopa, that's our home, but we're responsible to the state and to the United States. We've got to educate people. He mentioned that before. That's our job. So I would say the public, number 2, and I don't know why you would discriminate or whatever between faculty and staff. You need faculty and staff, and they need to be happy, they need to be well paid, and so you've got to take those people into responsibility and treat them equally. I don't see any reason why I would say, well, I got to treat my faculty better than staff. You talk about having your head on the block, or the other way, saying, well, the staff's a lot more important than the faculty. That's not true. I think we do have to spend more time, as Joanna mentioned, being responsible for the adjunct faculty.
Okay, thanks. Mr. Medrano.
Well, obviously, students will come number 1. You know, we have a problem in the United States and probably in the world with this growing discrepancy in the have and have-nots, and I think education is one of the great equalizers. And I think students are the answer to that, to create a more, maybe we can get back the middle class, hopefully. But anyway, so students would be number 1. I think next I would say taxpayers, and I'll tell you why. They get really tired of us raising taxes every time that vote comes around. We won't survive. They'll rebel. So we have to find some other methods. It's absolutely important that we go out and look for resources for funding. Now, thirdly, and I kind of feel a little guilty about this, but being a faculty for 30 years, faculty and staff, absolutely, we have to consider them because they are our foundation. Without good faculty and staff, we don't have a good organization. And lastly, although I have a lot of administrators who are friends, they would be last.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Haver.
Well, I have nothing to add. I agree completely. I wrote the same order, students number 1. And I just always believe that as a teacher. And I got in arguments over it. You have to put the children first. That's why those are the people we serve. And after that, taxpayers, because they're footing the bill. After that, the faculty, which is pretty important. And, you know, these lines can be crossed here and there. And the other employees, I hate to put that after faculty, just as Dr. Zook mentioned. I think that they deserve equal consideration.
All right, thanks very much. This is perhaps the last question in the lightning round. And it goes like this. First for Mr. Medrano. Each campus of the district is accredited separately by the Higher Learning Commission. What, in your mind, is the advantage of that versus accrediting the single community college district as a system?
Well, I think every college has its unique set of conditions, circumstances. I think to judge an entire district on the criteria that the HLC puts out, and I've worked on HLC documents, it would be unfair. I think it does not consider the uniqueness of each college. Each college has its unique aspect. Now, again, when we talked about One Maricopa would definitely, help with coordinating some of the things. But you cannot take away the autonomy of each college, and to have HLC accredit the entire district, I think would be a mistake. I think every college, like I said, has its unique aspects. It has its unique conditions and set of circumstances.
Okay, thank you. Ms. Haver.
Well, I'm not too impressed with the HLC from what I've learned about it. It seems they've interfered in ways that that are questionable, I would say, especially regarding the consultant that I mentioned who came up with some good cost-saving devices. The representatives from HLC said that, no, you don't have any say as board members. It has to be the chancellor. And then they switched their point of view on that later on, according to what I read, according to the report that I read. And so maybe I need more information. But I don't think that the HLC should be the final word. Maybe they deserve some say about the accreditation, but to have them the final say, I agree with Mr. Medrano. I don't think that's such a good idea.
Okay, thanks. Dr. Zook.
Well, I have worked on so many accreditations that and if you talk to a faculty or staff person that's been involved and they're honest, they'll say, why don't you just pull my toenails out? It'd be a lot easier and less painful. But we need accreditation. Do you understand what we're talking about? The United States is broken into regional groups, and the Higher Learning Commission used to be North Central. Now, how Arizona got into North Central, I don't know. But the North Central Accrediting Association was an excellent accrediting association, and it does wondrous things for the schools. Then guess who got involved and mucked up the thing, and that's our Congress. And so I wouldn't blame HLC or North Central for what Congress did to them, but I do not think we should be accredited as a system. I think it's so much better, and every college struggles with that and works with it. But boy, when you're done, you're proud of it when you've got your approval, and you're accountable to somebody, and your students know that they can graduate and get a degree from an accredited institution. That's the whole point.
All right, thanks very much. That's the end of the brief answers. So now we're to the point in the evening when we're going to have the final closing statements by each of the candidates. I'm going to ask you to do the room a favor, which is let all three of them speak in their turn, and then we'll have a round of applause for everybody. But we want to keep this forum so that we can close it up at 8 o'clock as you were promised. All right? So, insofar as Dr. Zook went first in the opening statements, we're going to change the order, and we'll have Ms. Haber go first. Ms. Haber.
Okay, I've really enjoyed participating in this debate, and I've learned quite a bit. For instance, I didn't know much about the Maricopa One idea, which I think very likely I would support. I believe that that I would be a good candidate for you because I would be challenging the other board members on decisions. And my challenge would have mostly to do with where the focus might be. And I wouldn't allow money to be spent in ways that are careless. And that's generally, from what I gather, they make decisions mostly on how to spend the money. And presently, the board has talked a lot about, well, we need to save money and so on and so forth, but then they vote to spend more money. And I think there needs to be examination of how that could be done in a better way. For instance, to have projects subjected to the bidding system, I think that would make a large difference. And I think we need to re-examine this idea of switching from 40% of full-time instructors to 60%. That would be very, very expensive. And at what cost would we be doing that? And so anyway, I hope you support me, and I would listen to everybody's point of view on the different areas, and I would serve you full-time because I am retired. I have the time to visit the college. That's another thing. I think it's very important for board members to make themselves present at the colleges, especially the ones they're supposed to present. I would talk to the students, the faculty, and the administrators, and so that I would have a really good idea of every single issue.
All right. Thank you very much. We'll hear next from Dr. Zook.
Well, I want to thank you again for coming. Did you say we have 10 minutes to close?
No, not quite.
Gosh.
Something short of that by about 7 minutes. Go ahead.
When I was on the city commission, the mayor never wanted to call on me because he knew that college professors talk for 50 minutes. So I want to say that I'm a little disappointed we didn't talk more about what was brought up in one of the questions about the community colleges being allowed to do 4 years. A governor appointed me, I can't tell you which one now, but I was on a statewide committee to talk about that very issue. And it was an interesting discussion, and they threatened us by saying if this committee doesn't make a recommendation, it'll go back to the state legislature. That's enough to put the fear of God in anybody, that give the state legislature the opportunity to make that decision. One of the things that I also want to tell you that I think when I talked about One Maricopa that I worked on when I was the provost at Ottawa University, and every community college person in here is going to say amen. It used to be if you got your associate degree from one of the community colleges, 60 hours, 64, whatever, you would take it to ASU or U of A and they'd say, good job, we'll accept 28 of those hours. Oh my goodness, that was so demeaning. And I got into it one day in our Paradise Valley thing, and a lady who had been the president of Gilbert College says, we need to talk. And ASU hired her and gave her carte blanche to do something about it. And I'm happy to tell you that we've moved away from that and whatever it is. And most of their credits are accepted. And if you've ever had the experience or your son and daughter was told that, I just couldn't believe it. Ottawa University was very accepting of ours. We didn't have to protect the faculty, and that's kind of what got into that. If you took business law at PV, you're going to take business law again at one of our state institutions because the instructor needs students. It was the same text, the same content basically, but they had to do it again. That's insulting. And so I was happy that I was helped in my little way about that. And I don't think there's any question that I can give you good service. I've been on boards. I know how board members need to respond and to be responsible. And I've already had in my mind about getting around and seeing the various college presidents. I was told you don't need to do that before the election. You better make yourself known at PV and at Phoenix College, but you don't have to wander out to Gilbert and Mesa and so on. But once you're elected, you better get out there. And I would look forward to doing that, and I'd look very forward to being your representative. And thank you very much for coming.
All right, thanks very much. Hello. And last, Mr. Medrano.
Okay, well, I think that I would serve the board well because, number one, of my experience in the community college system. I've started working at Glendale Community College. First of all, I was a student, graduated from the system. I started working at Glendale Community College in 1975, and I just retired in January of this year. I have worked at so many different levels in the community college system. Faculty. I've been an administrator. I've served on a variety of boards. I've served in leadership positions for faculty. I have also, outside of the colleges, I have served on, I've been the president of a school board. I've been a city councilman. I've been the vice mayor of a city. So I know the responsibilities and the duties of a board member. And most of all, I think that I have very good insight into our students. Having worked with them for 28 years in the classroom, I think I understand students. I understand a lot of their needs. I understand a lot of their challenges. As a board member, I think I would take those challenges and those needs into consideration whenever we had issues. And I'm also very good at working with people. As I mentioned before, I'm a very good listener. I will listen to other board members. I'm a big believer in consensus. I think consensus can always be reached, well, 99% of the time. And I think we need to work towards consensus. We need to work towards consensus to come up with some viable, constructive policies that will help the entire district. And of course, as you're well aware, there are a lot of challenges that the district is facing right now. And we need to work to resolve those challenges. And I think that as a board member, I think I would serve you well. I think that my experience in the district, I know it inside out. I know the district inside out because I've worked at so many levels. My experience in working with boards, I've been an elected official, and again, most importantly, my experience in working with students. I think that would give me a great advantage on this board. So I hope you will consider that and vote me in. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Medrano. And I need to take a couple of minutes for some final announcements, and they are these. First of all, I want to thank the candidates on behalf of the students and the district administration staff and faculty, and on behalf of the citizens of the community college district. It's unfortunate that everyone can't get elected who runs for office, but it's worth remembering that the energy and the resources that you've devoted just to this campaign are significant. And you're all to be commended for taking that time and investing that thought. And I might add, on a personal note, my impression this evening is that the three of you being here at one time, you all upped each other's game. So maybe you ought to make this a road act or something. Oh, maybe you will make this a road act. They'll be at Phoenix College next. Second, I want to thank Dr. Dale and the capable staff and administration of Paradise Valley Community College, both for hosting us and for the excellent facilities and the excellent technology. And a special shout out to the IT staff and the audiovisual staff that's been around the room this evening. Well done. Thanks for not cutting off my microphone. I want to thank the students who volunteered to help set this thing up, and particularly the timekeepers who did something that I couldn't possibly have managed and do the rest of the things that I was asked to do tonight. Thanks. I want to thank all of you, of course, not only for taking 2 hours of your time to come down and see this, but also for your thoughtful questions. We tried to mix them up some. I agree with Dr. Zook. There are many more things that should be talked about, and perhaps they'll be talked about at Phoenix College in case you care to go down there and look at those. And Dr. Dale, I'm not just promoting Phoenix College here. I'm just saying that's where they're going. I wish to point out a couple things to you. All three of the candidates have tables outside. They have literature outside. I believe there's also a table outside for voter registration. You should know that there's a lady in the back who has some papers in her hand, and voter registration, Donna in the back. I would point out to you that the voter registration deadline is October the 6th, so before you know it, if you're not registered to vote, and sometimes students forget to do that in the midst of what they're doing, don't forget to register, because it's all about what Voltaire said. You've got to speak your mind. Now, can we please give it up for the candidates? Well done.